If you've ever seen Numberblocks, odds are you've smiled and nodded politely to the fantastic lessons and editorials on learning to count inclusively. But have you ever heard of the secret 6-7 episode of Numberblocks? It had a very brief stay on the official Numberblocks YouTube channel, but it was removed for disturbing and otherwise horrifying young children to the extent that they couldn't even show themselves at school for a show and tell to tell about this incident. As for me, I'd prefer not to disclose how close I am to the directors and producers. But I will say, the show creator Joe Elliott was so discouraged by the final project that rumor is he left a rather large hole in the wall of CBeebies HQ that rodents far larger than rats are known to climb out of and infest, even to this very day. The title, 10 Pin Torment, briefly flashed on screen. No intro music, which is typical for a Numberblocks episode. But the fact that they actually showed a title card was actually kind of peculiar. It looked like it had a bite taken out of it by a vampire. Perhaps it had been snapped into by a punch card machine. There was a picture of Numberblocks character 4 sobbing uncontrollably. The caption, "It's not easy being green," was displayed below him. Quite peculiar. Quite peculiar indeed. That was copyright infringement on the Muppets. Purple-colored dice die Numberblock 6 is seen touching Numberblock 7's bottom red block rather limply and awkwardly. Numberblock 7 is frowning. Very odd, since he is otherwise always seen smiling. His rainbow-colored blocks are now all shades of dark red and puce. Some text flashed on screen briefly in an unknown font, possibly wingdings. I rewound the video and paused it, and though I forgot to screen capture it, I remember it translated to Day of Remembrance. Numberblock 6 says, "Zero parts," and I don't know exactly what she was alluding to with that. She then pulls out her block of dice, but instead of black dice dots, the dice are replaced with faces crying and screaming in agony, twisted and contorting in an impressive CG flash animation effect. The sixth side of the die is sobbing rather uncontrollably and biting its lip. In a low, hushed, muffled, and low-level tone, it can be heard whispering, "7." The dice dot that said 7 began throwing up into 6 transparent vials that were sitting on the floor of a moon-like surface. It wasn't clear if 6 and 7 were standing on the moon, but they didn't have astronaut outfits on, and all the other number blocks were mysteriously missing. No reason was announced. The dice began to glow on the 2 side. It began to glow until the 2 dots merged into 1. And then there were many dots. And then the dice disappeared. Now, it all happened rather fast, but there were 6 scalpels flashing behind 7. He wasn't shocked or otherwise horrified by this. He looked disturbed, as if he was reminded of something he had done to him, like an operation that had been performed upon him. An operation that perhaps changed the way he looked at life forever, with no choice of being who he once was ever again. Just then, the scene showed 6 dressed up as a nurse for some reason. Although 6 and 7 were presumably on the moon, where no hospitals existed. She grabs 7 and throws him on one of those hospital carts that you reel to the emergency room when the patient needs emergency surgery done to him. 6 starts wailing loudly, but this more or less confirmed that they were on the moon because no scream emerged from 6's mouth. There was a stain above the sheet that 6 had thrown on top of 7. Why was it stained red like that? Could it have been some kind of ketchup or perhaps pasta sauce? "Your wound is continuing to gape, 7. I'm afraid that we will have to resort to euthanasia. Huh? Since when was there a Numberblocks episode about end of life determination procedures? Six grabs a scalpel with her mouth, lifts off the sheet by seven's bottom block, and begins carving into him some more, or so it's implied, while Seven sobs profusely. Whatever that red substance was, continuing to splurt out of him like raspberry jam that decorated Six's velvet dice pattern block body. 6, 7, Six proclaimed. 6, 7, Six began to exclaim. 6, 7. 97%. Good night, 7. Good night. 6 slams some sort of plastic anesthesia or breathing mask onto 7 and turned up the nozzle on a fire extinguisher looking apparatus. She turned it up. She turned it up all the way. 7's eyes rolled up all the way in his head. His blocks exploded, simply burst off one after another, before wriggling like caterpillars that have been stepped on, without their guts splurting out all over the moon. Oh, this is lunacy, Six mumbled to herself, now alone forever on the surface of the moon. She began taking a bite out of a moon pie. Six started laughing uncontrollably before taking a roll of her dice, which floated up into the air due to the moon's lack of gravity. This didn't explain why they could audibly speak on the moon, though. The dice. It metamorphosed into some sort of Transformers-like creature. There were sounds of realistic bone snapping and screeching. Perhaps from an intern or a hamster the show producers had kept around as a therapy pet. The dice turned into a new Numberblocks character of infinite blocks in a repeating pattern of pink, blue, and white. It laid down on the surface of the moon, making pushing pelvic thrusts from where its vagina would normally be. But it did not have a vagina. There was a big, massive, gaping wound, but no pus or red substance emerged from it. Then, this new Numberblocks character started to laugh. It rolled around, covering itself in moon dust. I am infinity. I am nothing but a concept. It proclaimed in some sort of morbidly depressed but frantically frustrated imp voice, hyperventilating to itself, cackling, before it fell into a moon crater, presumably to its death. I am unreal. It shrieked as the scream faded away, as infinity presumably fell and fell and fell for many miles. More miles than I could ever care to know or remember. Infinity. Infinity on its side is an 8. The video was gone, presumably deleted, not long after posting. I asked Elliot about it, but he told me we couldn't be friends anymore. Something about baking a cake or not baking a cake, I don't quite remember. Didn't make much sense to me at the time. But now I understand. I understand what that disturbing episode of Numberblocks was all about. This entire time. You see, 6 was a girl. 7 was a guy. So are the following two numbers: 6, 7. 6, 7. 7, 8, 9.